I'm Graham Robinson.
I'm Greg Robinson.
And I'm Ed Dickens with Railroad Showcase.
What a fantastic trip. We spent a week going through Nevada out to Utah, touched the tip of Wyoming as we were chasing the big boy back out to Ogden. What an amazing time.
It really was. It was such a good time, one, to spend with us as a family, but also to meet all of the people from all around the world who are traveling to experience that same thing, both the big boy and the celebration of the 150th anniversary itself.
And not an exaggeration to say people from around the world. I read that there were people from all 50 states who were there enjoying the celebration, and we ran into people from Japan, from China, from Australia. I'm sure I heard some people from the UK who were out there as well, and even more. It was really an international celebration.
Absolutely.
One of the other things that I really appreciated is that, of course, in the midst of all of the party atmosphere, the locals in Ogden were just enjoying another street fair, basically, and of course there was all of the rail fan celebration and you know, the frothing over the reenactment and the big boy coming out. So that was great fun. But there was respect to the history of the event that was given, which is really appropriate.
Absolutely. It wasn't just an excuse to have a big party. There was the due recognition of the significance of what all that meant, not just for the railroad industry, but also for the history of the country.
And well, the country and then ultimately the world.
Yeah.
It is just so hard to overstate the significance of that one piece of infrastructure. A lot of people forget that when that railroad was built, travel across the continent went, if you were going overland, it went from 6 months to 6 days. It was just a huge change, and it went from something that could potentially being life-threatening to a trip that by the standards of the day was relatively comfortable, and even though it was expensive, it was not prohibitive for a lot of people to make that trip.
Well, and even that cost, when compared to what it would have taken to travel that distance without the railroad, is still far less expensive relatively.
It changed the entire landscape and the entire history of what was going on, because when that was built, all of the states were over in the east. Mm-hmm. And then California was just this island out in this mass of unclaimed territory. Well, I mean, it had been claimed by the United States, but it was
untamed.
It was utterly untamed. It was an open, unsettled, ungoverned set of territories. Mm-hmm. And the Transcontinental Railroad connected all of this with the West Coast and made this artery that just established the filling in of the entire continent and the getting of resources from the West Coast out to the East. It changed the way people lived. It changed the overall economy of the country. It changed the way people ate day by day, because eventually when trains got faster and more regular, there was produce available to people in the eastern half of the United States that was simply not available before. So it just, again, you can't say too much about how important the Transcontinental Railroad was for the development of the United States. And then subsequent transcontinental lines that came to the north and the south of that. And as we know, of course, we're preaching to the choir here, that railroads were the backbone of American transportation in every way back in the 1800s and early 1900s, and even still, they are the backbone of commercial and natural resource transportation.
Absolutely.
So, what did you feel about the event itself, the atmosphere of Spike 150?
Again, it was all sorts of people. I was surprised at the variety of people that I saw there. Honestly, I was expecting more of a male gendered atmosphere of usually more adults that would have an appreciation for that. But it looked like almost any other festival that was family friendly. There was people of all ages, of all genders, and of all nationalities there that were interested. They weren't just there because they had to be.
One of the other things that I liked was the friendly atmosphere that was out there. On social media, there were a lot of people commenting about, I don't think I want to go. There's just going to be too many foamers. Yeah. And the only place that you saw any of that was during the chase. Even then, when people were standing shoulder to shoulder on the photo line, we spent an entire day chasing the train, and we didn't run into people who were upset or angry or belligerent. There were a couple of people who maybe weren't on their best behavior, but out of the thousands and thousands of people that we saw, most of them were having a great time and were happy to share the experience with all the people around them. So it really was a really positive atmosphere.
Yes.
We also had a chance to meet some people that we've been wanting to meet for a long time. We met Steve and Otto from Railfan and Railroad Magazine. That was fun.
Yeah, that was out at the summit there while we were getting everyone steaming up for the day.
Yeah, early on when we were getting our behind-the-scenes footage at their shop out there. So it was really a pleasure to meet you guys. We just literally walking past each other on the street, we ran into Steve Sweeney from Trains.
Yeah, and so we had a great conversation with him there, but then we also bumped into him again a few days later on the platform there around the 4014, and we actually got an interview with him. So
which you'll be seeing later. Yeah,
we're pretty excited about that.
So it was good. It was good to see you, Steve, and of course, it was a great pleasure to have a chance to meet Ed Dickens.
Absolutely, that was my personal highlight of the entire week.
We didn't hold out hope that we were going to have time, or rather that there was going to be any time in his schedule to give us any attention at all. But we had run into some people that we knew, some people from California and a couple of other states were kind of standing around in a huddle after dark. They had the engines lit up with the floodlights, and there were people out there getting photographs. And all of a sudden, just out of the dark, Mr. Dickens walks up and starts chatting with our group, and we have a nice little conversation. Learned that he was familiar with the Grand Scales Quarterly way back when, and
which was super cool.
Which was super cool. That was flattering, and he used to be a reader. And then we ran into him on the last day we were there on Saturday and had a chance to get a full interview. So we are grateful for that, and we're going to look forward to sharing that with you in just a second. We also ran into a number of our viewers, and so their positive feedback was fun. And we ran into our just general railroad friends that we've known for years. It's just, here you are in this city that I've never been to Ogden before, and you turn around the corner and then you see some guy you've known for 20 years because he's there as well. That's always kind of fun. We didn't get to see all of you. Eventually, we hope to have a chance to run into a great number of you at events, and we'll keep giving away memberships and free DVDs for those of you that we do run into.
The Canadian National Railway has been in operation for 100 years, and, in celebration, are starting a 16-month tour of their routes through North America. The company was formed in 1919 as an act of Parliament in Canada, when several failing railroads fell into government ownership and were all consolidated, with several other railroads already owned by the government, into one company. It was publicly owned until it was privatized in 1995. The celebration will travel through Canada and even dipping down into the U.S., crisscrossing the routes. The schedule can be found on their website, cn100.ca, and each stop will include events for the public and some private for the employees of the railroad. Activities will include musical performances, children's activities, safety education, and various mobile displays about the railroad.
The federal government has formally canceled almost $1 billion in funding for the California High-Speed Rail project. The president first threatened to recall the funding months ago, and this Thursday, a letter was sent to CEO Brian Kelly from the FRA announcing that it was ending the agreement to obligate $928 million to California since they had not made reasonable progress on the project. While this only adds further uncertainty to the project's future, Governor Newsom continues his plan to finish the project. He says they will get the money back and, quote, "This is California's money appropriated by Congress, and we will vigorously defend it in court."
By all accounts, Union Pacific's efforts around the Gold Spike 150th anniversary celebrations were a great success. The steam crew met its restoration deadline, and the Big Boy performed well on its trip out from Cheyenne to Ogden. At Ogden, on May 9th, the 844 and the 4014 were brought together in the traditional nose-to-nose arrangement for UP's event just south of Union Station. Speeches were given, and the ceremonial tapping of the spike was performed by Sandy Dodge, descendant of General Grenville Dodge, Utah Governor Gary Herbert, Union Pacific Chairman, President and CEO Lance Fritz, Utah Congressman Rob Bishop, Margaret Yee, a descendant of a Central Pacific employee, and Scott Moore, Union Pacific Senior Vice President, Corporate Relations, and Chief Administrative Officer. Bleachers and large television displays were erected. Several streets were blocked off for vendor booths and displays. The 4-day Heritage Festival attracted approximately 100,000 people. That Sunday, Big Boy and 844 started their journey back toward Cheyenne. On board were those who purchased the rather expensive fundraising tickets for the privilege of special access and of being pulled behind the Big Boy. As of this filming, the train has made it safely to Laramie and is scheduled to finish its trip to Cheyenne Sunday, May 19th. The only mishap of note happened last Thursday in Rawlins, Wyoming, when rails spread and 2 center sets of drivers of the rear engine dropped to the ties. The incident happened at a very low speed and was remedied in a few hours. All in all, Union Pacific should be very proud of a successful event.
The governor of Nevada just signed legislation that will require at least 2 crew members to be operating on any Class 1 and Class 2 freight trains in the state. While the Association of American Railroads is in opposition to laws like this, the unions have worked hard to get them instated. This new legislation imposes fines for failures to comply starting at $5,000 for the first offense, $10,000 for the second within 3 years, and $25,000 for the third. ProgressiveRailroading.com quoted BLET Nevada State Legislative Board Chairman Matt Parker, who said, "This is about the safety of the communities we travel through, not just for the train crews, but more importantly, for the residents of those communities."
A new bill was introduced to the House of Representatives this past week. It was presented by U.S. Representative Harley Ruda and would prevent transit funds used by transit agencies from being issued to purchase Chinese railcars and assets, as well as implementing a cybersecurity plan within those agencies. With 65,000 workers currently employed within the production of these cars and a large economy surrounding the industry, the press release said the purpose of the bill is to ward off the efforts of China to undermine the U.S. economy and national security.
We're here in Ogden with Ed Dickens, the head of the UP STEAM program, and pleased to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you.
So, everyone was on the edge of their seat about the fact that you guys weren't able to have a shakedown run any earlier than you did. What did that feel like for you guys?
Should have been in my shoes. No, it was naturally we wanted to have it together sooner, but it was just it's just the way things happened, the way we were able to get it together, and all the little things that we had to work through. We knew that regardless of the weather conditions, whether it was day or night, we didn't intend to go out at midnight. I know there's some fun internet speculation about running at midnight and those things, and it wasn't our intention. But that day that we operated, our intention was to run to Greeley, and we had some other things that we needed to work through, and it actually worked out to our advantage. We had a little crosshead running warm over there, and one of the strategies when you break those components in is by reversing the locomotive and working it, you change the dynamic and the thrust on the component, and that can actually aid in the break-in process. So that I made that decision at Nunn, and we just returned back to nunning it, or back home from Nunn. So it all worked out good. But the important thing is that we had to be able to deliver on the May 4th event. That was a christening event that we had scheduled, and we wanted to make sure and hit that target. So that was our next target that we had. Arriving here on the 8th was the target beyond that. So you're right, we're breaking the locomotive in. We are still. We've got to adjust lubricators and just monitor all this new machinery. There is so much new machinery here. We just want to continue to follow a very conservative practice and make sure that everything is broken in, because we've got a lot of plans for this locomotive, not only this year, but for the future. So the whole plan behind the rebuild was to make a locomotive with the same characteristics, the same reliability as the 844, and that's what we've done. From the beginning, I've wanted to do this level of work to the 844 because it needs it. The running gear is extremely tired, and so we need to breathe new life into it. New crosshead guides, the 844 needs that, so we were able to do that on this locomotive.
So, in the engine's performance on the way out from Cheyenne, day 1 versus day 2 versus day 3, you say that this has effectively been your long shakedown run. How has the engine performed in your estimation over the days, one day to another, and are you happy with how things have come out?
Very happy with it. It fires almost as good as the 844. You can tell that by the lack of smoke, and that's your indicator with an oil burner. Oil burning steam locomotives should have almost no smoke. If you see voluminous clouds of smoke from an oil burning locomotive, something's wrong or somebody doesn't know what they're doing, because it's a terrible waste of the fuel resource. This locomotive, we're still kind of dialing in the consumption, but as we planned this several years ago, we were figuring on a consumption, just for a lack of a better way to really figure it, was double that of the 844. 844 very reliably gets a very reliable consumption that we can plan. We're starting to see that with this too. So we can start to project where we can run with it in a day, where our water consumption is. Our water consumption is low. The advantage of having a diesel in the consist allows us to have that diesel lift some of the train at various points of the operation. If we need to extend our fuel and water, we have that resource. I know from a purist perspective, a diesel in the consist is something that just seems to draw the ire of many people, but in the reality of the world that we live in, it's a very important resource for us. The most important part of the diesel is the dynamic braking. When you consider all these big brake shoes on this engine, on the tender, on the trailing truck, we want to conserve all that stuff. So it's all part of the fuel strategy and all the economics of being able to do this.
So from a mechanical standpoint, as far as, you know, the thousands of mechanisms that you guys rebuilt, no serious problems?
No. are very pleased with everything. You can see how oily it is, and that part of that is just inherent with an articulated. You've got these big ball joints, you've got all these big steam lines. Each one of those has its own set of terminal checks with their own set of feeds and splitters and lubrication feeds from the lubricator. So it does devour more valve oil. And that's important because all of those components must be moving. And they have to be constantly lubricated with high temperature, high pressure steam oil. So you're going to see that kind of dripping down and splattering all over the front of the engine. It kind of looks cool in a way, but we'll eventually dial those feeds back. But what you're seeing now is what you would have seen in the 1940s and 1950s, just a utilitarian machine. It's not going to stay clean, it's not going to stay pretty, but it's just a big rugged mauling machine. And I can tell you the steaming capacity on this is enormous. In my role, I climb down inside the boiler frequently. I'm oftentimes the only one that does. It's very, very tight quarters down inside that 844. It's tight to get down in the steam dome, but I can nearly sit up on the tubes and flues inside. It's an enormous steam space in there compared to the 844. It's got nearly 8,000 gallons of water. And when we first steamed it up that first day, the water glasses we didn't seem to be losing water, and I was concerned. We've got a blockage somewhere. This can't be right. We're running air pumps, we're running a dynamo, but yet we've got this water. And it's slowly going down, and I'm trying to get rid of that. I'm trying to consume that water. Well, that just speaks to the capacity that this locomotive was designed. Think about it's delivering its steam output to almost the same equivalent of 2 engine units on the 844. So when you open that throttle, you open the throttle on the 844, you get a pretty immediate response. Open the throttle on this, you're taking the steam volume and it's immediately going to all 4 cylinders. So it takes a little more of that throttle. But you've got the steaming capacity, the superheater header, the superheaters, the volume of the dry pipe, the volume of these 8-inch diameter steam lines. These are 8-inch diameters. And it's got 4 of them going to each valve chest. I mean, 8 inches, think about that. That's like a sewer pipe. And you open that throttle, and immediately they're all filled.
With a potential of 300 psi.
300 psi. Once we get running, it's over 700 degrees superheat. You can see the blue discoloration on that expansion joint, and you can see here I was down. We stopped many times along the way, and that hot oil dripped on my arm. And I can tell you it's very hot. And it's just coming off of there. But so we run for a period of time, and you're smelling things. You smell all the new paint. You can smell the paint we painted on the engine bed. You can smell the jacketing. You can smell oil that flies up and hits something. You smell grease. So your senses are very attuned to smelling something that's hot. You're smelling cast iron. You're smelling bronze. And all of those has a very unique smell to it. When the engine's all new, your senses are being overwhelmed with hot stuff. Hot stuff for a steam locomotive person is danger. You want to stop. Something's hot. And you just work through that, kind of get your blood pressure down, and just kind of let the engine work. So that's why you just have to be methodical about it. When things are going well, and you think you've got it, that's a dangerous point, because you could make the wrong decision by trying to do something that the engine's not ready for. So when they used to break the locomotives in, they did it all the time. They'd send them out, they'd put them into a helper turn, or they'd work them on a slow drag where you could work and let those components just work together. Because all those packing segments are moving in those pistons, and the valve is moving back and forth. And it's sliding on newly machined surfaces. And we did all the machine work, so we know that it's accurate, we know that it's smooth and nice, but you just don't want to take any chances. We had to get to Ogden. We couldn't run the risk of messing something up. So you're not going to see us flying down the track. And even when we get the locomotive broken in, it's kind of contrary to our objective of letting people see the locomotive by running fast. We'll run fast on occasion. There are times we'll need to. But 40 miles an hour on this is comparable to 60 miles an hour on the 844. Smaller driver, all the machinery speeds, You know, all those things you got to think about.
Out of curiosity, what sort of materials are in all of the flexible joints for the front engine?
It's the same material that they used. So we made all new bronze rings. That's a brand new bronze ring. But the spherical piece of the cast steel piece on the inside was original, but it was worn. So what we did is we just changed the geometry of the spherical fit, and we machined the opposite in that bronze piece. So by the time they came together, it was still in the correct relationship, same relationship. This is Denny Clark. Come on over, Denzel. Yeah, Denzel's the real deal. How are you?
Getting older.
Ah, that's okay. Very good to see you. How are you?
Oh, I'm proud of you.
Yep.
You made a monumental move here.
Well,
You're
Denzel,
awesome.
we met Denzel when we were here when we brought the locomotive from California.
And what's his experience?
Denzel is the real deal. You want to tell him what you did?
I fired on this old boy, big boy, in the early steamers in the early 50s.
Well, we converted it to oil,
Yeah.
and it's a
Now
lot
it's
easier
oil.
than when you had it.
When I fired it, between here and Echo, it used 27 ton of coal. Now, Ed's done a great job.
We'll burn 1,500 gallons of fuel.
So, did you imagine that you would ever see one in steam again?
No. We had some that were steamers, that were smaller, that had diesel. But this guy is one of the greatest men we've got in this country.
That's really kind of you.
We wanted to see you, and I'm sorry I can't.
No, it's really, I was hoping I was going to see you. You know, you told me that story about the brakemen would go down and they climb up on the tender and they get down in the water tank.
Right.
You go through the tunnel, it was so hot and miserable. The engineer and fireman, they didn't have a choice. They had to ride in the cab. Didn't you guys have the air valve down? And they tried all kinds of
we
things to
have
help
an
you
air
guys
valve.
out.
Yeah. We'd would use some waste material and wet it and put it in the blower and blow it on our face.
And just kind of
And
hunker
then-
down.
And then we would take our coat and put it over our head.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. But you know, you had that throttle out. You know, it's not like you can ease off going through the tunnel. That throttle's out.
No, it's
and that
wild.
engine just
Oh,
that
the smoke's
Stoker
so
jet.
full.
That Stoker jet. I bet you burned a few tons just going through the tunnel by
Oh, we
itself.
did.
So you got all the cinders and all that smoke coming right back in the cab.
It was hot.
And what if your stack hood doesn't work? Oh, that's going to really make a mess of things, isn't it?
Yes.
It's really going to get hot then.
I had a student fireman who was with me on one, and he was going to jump out. I and the engineer had to grab him and hold him. He said it had killed him.
It had killed him, yeah. He told me the story when it was so hot and miserable, the brakemen, some of the brakemen, they were like, I can't take this. So they walked back, climb up on the tender, open the water tank, and by then the water was low, and there's a ladder in there, and they climbed down on the ladder and then close the tank lid, and that's where they'd ride.
That's right.
Those were the
They're
smart guys.
smarter than that.
Yeah.
Well, I interrupted you.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. We were done. We were going to go up to the engine. You want to go meet Austin? There's Austin up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kid knows more about big boys than anybody alive. Except you.
Here's my friend. I'd like you to know him.
Yeah, we
Garth
met
Hansen.
at Cass Junction.
We did.
How are you?
Right,
Good to see you.
He's a retired engineer, and
Yeah, I
he
worked on
fired
these
on
babies.
this too.
They were
He brought me
challenged
down.
in
Oh,
my
yeah.
day.
Well, we converted this one to burn oil.
Yeah.
You'd love it. You just sit
No
there.
more cinders in the eyes.
No. Yeah, it's a real good steamer.
Well,
So you've run one of these engines.
I've fired on one of these. 2 summers I did.
In the-
53 and 54. When I come back in 55, they tore cold chutes down. That was it.
Right. So what are some of your favorite memories of being in the cab of these things?
Well, one time I was called off the exit board to help a fireman. That was in Evanston. The stoker broke down coming into Evanston, and we tried shoveling the coal in there. And it took 2 firemen, and we got up the top. We went about 10 miles, and you drop off the Wasatch. The air got slow. The train set up. We stopped there by the time we built the fire back up good, and then down the hill we went.
And you made the rest of the run without a stoker.
Without a stoker, we just shoveled.
We used to run them around the yard a little bit, these locomotives. When we placed them in the roundhouse for repair, the foreman would take us and we would walk around the outside, and every stall had new brick. And he said most of the firemen would run through. They couldn't stop just boy. Yeah. So I learned something. When I wanted to stop, I went in emergency in there.
You're not going to take any chances.
No.
Yeah, see, the end of the stall was all new brick because they'd run through it.
They couldn't stop.
Yeah, they had one place they called Jackson Hole where a guy named Jackson went through.
We've got that same thing in Cheyenne.
Have you?
Steve Lee, I think it was 1991, ran the 3985 through the end of the stall, and you can see to the end of the day that stall's bulged out. And Lynn Nystrom took some expanding foam and filled it in where the bricks cracked. He told me that story.
Well,
they were moving the 3985 in, and somebody didn't answer on the radio, and they kept going and going and going, and boy, by the time they stopped, the engine was just pushing the wind of the wall out. You can see it to this day. Next time you go to the roundhouse, you'll see it.
The old engineers, the old timers, used to want to have the steam right on 300.
Oh, you bet.
You didn't move.
And they didn't want that water popping off.
Oh, yeah.
Wasting water.
That's how this is.
Some of them really got
See that
excited.
guy right up there, Austin? He's my fireman.
Yeah.
He is just like that all day long, right at 300.
Yeah.
That's what you got to do. We've got that exhaust steam injector on the other side. We completely rebuilt it. It works excellent.
That's good.
And I'd really like for you guys, if you're here tomorrow, I'd like you to see it. It's going to bring back some memories.
It was.
You know, that exhaust steam injector makes that certain noise. You pull it back, and the turbine goes,
Yeah.
and then it goes, and you can watch it. It works perfect. Regulating wheels all rebuilt.
We live 60 miles north, and my wife broke her shoulder, her arm, I just brought her home yesterday. I don't think I can come back.
Oh, darn.
I had to leave today. I brought her from the hospital and the rehab, and she said to tell you hello. She knows how much we respect you and honor you.
Well, thank you.
You're one of the greatest men we ever met.
Well, gosh, that sure is an honor for you to say that.
Alrighty, thanks for joining us. That's it for episode number 19. We're glad you came along. Stick with us for the next few weeks. We're going to have more on the UP Big Boy, and we're going to have a couple of episodes talking about all of the action that happened there at Promontory.
It was really nice getting to see some of you guys out there. We look forward to meeting more of you in the future, and thanks for watching.
And remember, keep your hand on the throttle and your eye on the rail.